The story of this manhwa takes place in Asia, where we will meet our protagonist, Du-ming, who moves through the city on the subway, very proud to do what he likes the most, be otaku. As they heard, our protagonist is an otaku, and he loves being one, because he expresses that his life is and will be perfect, as long as the manga and anime continue to exist, in that, he notices some strange noises behind the walls he walks through, so he decides peeking out to see what is happening. When doing so, he realizes that there are objects and things flying everywhere, because on the other side of the wall a blonde girl with beautiful eyes and a very pretty body is fighting. And yes, the woman is quite pretty, but pretty does not mean that she is harmless, because there we see her fighting against a redhead who threatens her for a box that she is carrying, and the truth is that the combat is quite violent, since both of them they attack like they want to kill each other. In the duel, the enemy manages to snatch the box from the woman, and in a strange turn of events, he passes through the protagonist like a deadly arrow, and with this, begins a bonding process between the protagonist and the weapon that has just passed through him. The red-haired guy, whose name is Johnson, tries to retrieve his gun while the blonde remains calm and watches the event. Well, the girl cannot believe the link that is occurring between the protagonist and the weapon. The good and friendly Johnson tries to kill our protagonist, but fails because when he tries, a cocoon of purple and mystical energy is formed, capable of repelling the powerful attack. Before the good Johnson decides that he will attack with all his power again, the blonde girl recognizes that power as that of the Queen of Thorns. In a moment the cocoon is released, demonstrating overwhelming strength and power to the redhead in just a few seconds. When faced with two possible adversaries, Johnson decides that he is strategically outmatched and he is also wounded, so withdrawal is his best option. When the danger of that enemy has withdrawn, our protagonist loses strength and falls, but is supported by the beautiful blonde at the last moment, welcoming him to the world of fairies. After a chaotic night full of emotions, with so many supernatural things, our protagonist wakes up in his bed. He looks tired and he feels different, but he still has to continue with his random life, so he goes to school even though he has been told made late. He also sees on the news that a strange explosion has occurred that people don't know how it happened. Upon reaching school he is reprimanded by his teacher, who tells him that he should be punished for being late. He says he won't again. Although not even he believes that lie, and later he goes to recess, their supernatural things begin to happen to him again. As he manages to stop a soccer ball at very high speed, and after being bitten by a dog, the protagonist he notices that his hand regenerates in seconds, and when he wonders what was happening to him, the woman who saved him arrives. The pretty blonde causes our protagonist endless memories about what we have just summarized, and he stands there watching her. This girl introduces herself as Ayla Clems, a half-French half-Chinese mixed race. In that, the rest of the manhwa characters go crazy screaming for the beautiful new girl. The beautiful Ayla decides to sit behind the main character, proclaiming herself cousins even if she is not. After introducing herself with her classmates, she continued her presentation in the exercise class, where she demonstrates the power to run 100 meters in seconds, an expert in volleyball and ping pong, showing that she is the female protagonist of this franchise. When the protagonist comes out he meets her, starting his headaches. Now with the beautiful Ayla in his house, she, like a good girl, is ready to show the protagonist her beautiful fairy, Vigilf, a creation of another civilization. There he tells him that since he has developed powers too, now they will have a new life. The protagonist, instead of observing the beautiful waifu and thinking about all the marketing that he can sell by becoming a superhero, he refuses, since he prefers his common and simple life otaku locked in his room. The fairy Vigilf tells him that there is a method to remove his fairy, and it is a simple one, dying. With that he could surely reincarnate in a world of his choice as an ice guy, but of course the protagonist thinks of his family and does not want to die. Ayla tells him that she will take care of him, protect him and train him to live well. Then our protagonist Dooming he loses inside an abyss with beautiful purple colors. He is lost in the middle of nowhere. Before emerging he sees a beautiful waifu with silver hair and wearing a great crown, which can come out of that rare spatial psychic dimension, a cocoon of energy from where another cute waifu comes out, almost the same but younger, to which the fairy and Ayla bow. The Queen of Thorns finds out that the battle where she participated 6,500 years have passed. She was going to introduce herself with her new host. The Queen of Roasts is called Vita City before we find out about her abilities, the ability to control space and then proclaim her to our protagonist, to use her power if she is about to die, also emphasizing that her level of adaptation between them is very low. That is why she remains silent. With that in mind it is revealed to us that the fairies of the second generation, they are acidic from the research fruit of the first generation fairies. That is why they are so important to find someone like the Queen of Thorns. Among the things we also learn is that the adaptation level is 16% between Dooming and the Fairy Queen. so she can't use the power of this powerful fairy much. Once the Queen of Thorns disappears, our pretty blonde claims a resting place in the house of the main character. Then the leading couple, united in a training run of only 4 hours, arrive at an isolated area to train. As a good casual conversation, Ayla asks the Queen what is the protagonist's regeneration capacity, and to the surprise of many of us, it will only take 6 hours to regenerate a broken limb, and a fracture only takes 10 minutes, something that surprises the protagonist Ayla. Recognizing the superiority of the first generation of fairies, with Ayla knowing the limits of her beloved protagonist, she arms herself for battle. Invoking his pragmatic and powerful battle armor, the protagonist in his turn achieves the invocation of a sword and a shield. The waifu praised the protagonist's team, covering the offense with his sword and the defense with his shield. After limiting his abilities to Johnson's level, she begins to annoy him with her power or train him, as they want to say, through blows and beatings worthy of a crazy thunderous sound, hurting him and breaking his body. Several times, the protagonist breaks his arm, while Ayla demands that he get up. The training lasts for hours, where he makes him suffer before they finally finish. With time to feel more than pain, the protagonist complains about his lousy ability, while she takes his hand, and a gentle act accommodates him before telling him a truth. She was there to protect him in the comfort of her bed. She calculates how to make him survive, realizing that he would not last a duel for more than 30 seconds, which for many would be a champion. The Queen of Thorns proclaims to him that in his previous success of repelling Johnson, it was by burst of fusion energy, and that she used the soul of its previous user to protect him. Now Dooming went into emotional mode, asking how to survive, how to get to the next day, how to be able to see the new day, to which the Queen of Thorns tells her that there is a method for 40%. The next day is the opportunity to be appealed by the beautiful Ayla, which does not hesitate to give her a beating. Where the two fairies watch the training, the Ayla fairy cannot believe that there is a method to use 40% of her power, to which the Queen affirms this, but is dissatisfied with the little girl. Tunda demands that Ayla give her an example of destroying her body. She, little given to restraining herself, accepts, and throws a whirlwind of energy at her, which to the surprise of some was only 10% of her power. With it in her mind, her training now would be to be beaten by the beautiful Ayla. History remembers that the protagonist has a civil, social, and school life. Before once again we move away from it in his hard training. Before going to the main event, the Queen of the Thorns tells him that he is ready, initiating the memory of the previous owner. Overloading with energy, her brain with its shattered head initiates the memories of yesteryear, beginning with the Queen of Thorns holding her previous possessor, a wounded blonde, before having the presence of more intertwined memories, a moment of transition, screams of a council, and in other army scenes, the screams that she brought destruction to her nation. In other scenes, the Queen of Thorns fighting against warriors in dark armor. She looks outstanding with her red cavalry dominating and killing the enemies of her people, and as an enemy of the Lord of the Rings, a warrior dragon arrives, she destroys him in a scene worthy of Gandalf, splitting him in two so that a last voice from that memory is heard, saying, "I will always protect you." Standing out the Queen of a blue moor with the sea, where she stays while the image of Dooming the two emerges in parallel, and he returning to the present. Now that he has returned to the present, he finds out that despite some slight inconveniences in his synchronization, he was able to accept those memories, improving his power. With them his training continues, where it is seen that his power has improved by training with Ayla. She tells her that he will receive help from a group called the Ark, but then emerging from the air he comes to a crow that, taking the form of a shadow, attacks the protagonist from behind. In this story we can see a piece of Johnson's history, a man who makes a call to ask about his daughter, in addition to promising to give her a gift and telling her that she must take her pills and medicines. Being able to see that the man lost his wife and his daughter is losing her sadly due to the same genetic disease. The present is shown with the waifu being stolen by the evil raven. At another point the protagonist is in shock, unable to do anything, before a man emerges from the streets. And that was Johnson with a spear red. The protagonist enters a crisis before such a formidable adversary. The Queen of Thorns reminds him of his training, his beautiful training with fractures, pain, and a lot of disrespect for human rights. Recovering his composure, he prepares to fight, starting the fight with a brutal attack from Johnson. At another point, the waifu is released by the shadow, before dozens of chains bind her to something, not necessarily pretty for the protagonist, but for us the spectators, yes. The problem is that he could not recognize his attacker. He returned in the Dooming battle, and Johnson has a fight that emulates the fights of the great heroes of the mythological era. In an act of attack and defense, Johnson, the more experienced man, manages to cut the protagonist's arm. They're writhing in pain, with internal tomato sauce coming out everywhere. The protagonist begins to lose his composure. Johnson mentions that it is not out of hatred, he is only doing it for his pretty daughter, remembering that he did not have the means to sustain the expenses. Preparing a final attack, the protagonist collapses before Johnson prepares the coup de grace. Elsewhere, Alia recognizes Dark Shadow. After a little talk, she offers him to pay him double, and in a rare display of loyalty from this thug, says that he even had principles, a real man, so he tells him that we'll have him there for a while. At another point, Johnson recoils from the immense amount of energy. He can't believe that other such amounts of power are emerging. The Queen of Thorns recognizes that the memories of the previous user are gaining strength and making as the adaptation power level rises, acknowledging with a sweet voice and a sad look her former master Lord Naomi. She goes into crisis before crying out to the heavens that she had used all her strength to keep the last of her master, to which he emerges and approaches her, and without saying anything but putting his face with her, she can only nod, using one last technique, reforming herself in the body of the protagonist. Lord Naomi emerges, who, in the same Vegeta style, calls him an insect to Johnson, who gets angry and launches into another fierce fight. At another point, Ayla manages to escape by activating her armor, or rather suit. Recognizing her inability, Shadow encourages her to protect the protagonist instead of killing him. Alias, knowing that his main character could die and that without him the series ends, he runs to the battlefield, but when he arrives he notices that Johnson is mortally wounded. Our number one generic villain is eliminated, and the protagonist, in an improbable act of a character from a common series, begins to cry for having ended the life of another person. In another remote place, El Cuervo looks at something very interesting. Our protagonist, lying on his bed, checks his cell phone. Ayla tells him that he had to go to the organization, in addition to the fact that someone new will come. Possibly it's a girl, and well, we already know what's next. We don't know that, but anyway, the protagonist eats and rests while he eats and tortures himself with super spicy food. The Queen of the Fairies explains that her level of adaptation reached 25%, telling him that he will be able to use abilities and the creation of his second personality that will protect him. Our beloved protagonist, as a good otaku with days off, decides to make up for time by playing. Where does he meet the waifu? In short, while playing, his friends from school arrive, and as a good otaku he has a social life. There are 2 NPC random characters, and a girl who we hope will evolve into a protagonist, so his friends give some normality to that life, which is a disaster and possible death, where they make a parody and annoy her internet friend. In the end, she does a scouting mission with the new girl, where the girl watches with interest the Sunday fight against Johnson, and their gentleman the second. Appears generic villain, the theatrical villain, where he performs the dance with a girl in hypnosis. On the ashes where Johnson was once a figure emerges, who takes from the remains a garment that he holds in his hands, where he proclaims the winds that he will get his revenge. In a change of scene, we can see the Dooming House, the references, and what a good otaku is, which must have a collection of figures, posters, and more. The young man ignores the messages of the blonde waifu before the Queen of the Fairies. I warned him about the presence of minor fairies. There unexpectedly emerge 3 random enemies, a dancing guy, a weirdo, and a leader, a man with long hair, where the 3 rebuke the death of their friend, which the protagonist decides by not responding. The situation tenses moment by moment, where Dooming prepares for battle, but the Queen of Thorns detects an incredible force that approaches from the sky, crashing to the ground. In an epic entrance, she reaches a pretty girl with pigtails, like a good pretty girl from an Asian series, in a pink dress wearing armor, at least the breastplate. Her presence is seen dominating the place in seconds. You are Dooming, proclaims the pretty girl. Our protagonist can only assume that this will be more of a problem. Thus, in an American Chinese food store, our protagonist rebukes the girl who is the sister of the Ayla. This girl, like a good millennial, ignores the protagonist with her cell phone, while telling him that it is obvious, recapitulating the moments of her arrival a while ago. This girl, with a look and a phrase of death, manages to go back to the team of generic villains. Now back in the present, the main character wonders how she has a sister like this, who doesn't look as refined as the original. The girl receives the call from her sister asking where they are and what the hell are they doing. The girl with the pigtails tells the protagonist that she is now a celebrity for having eliminated Johnson. This puts him on a radar, and more with the video of how he killed him. Johnson being the strongest of the 3rd generation, the girl willing to know how the hell someone with only 50% adaptation managed to beat him. The Chia asks him for a duel, so she drags our hero to fight outside while he denies. Thanks to a good star, his friends have arrived just in time, together with the red-haired waifu. After a presentation with the girl, among a bit of chaos, a woman gets her bag stolen. The protagonist, as a good alpha male, subdues the thief in a second, while the pretty girl stolen from the glasses smiles mysteriously. Once at our protagonist's house, the girl is surprised that this is the protagonist's house. In a casual conversation where the girl meets, he throws himself on the couch and talks about how nice the girl who saved our leading lady was. He receives messages from the waifu that was saved in the previous chapter saying, Thank you, little brother. The blonde girl makes fun of our protagonist before telling him a secret, which will interest more than one. The girl is actually a 16-year-old teenager who was a carrier fairy since she was a baby, and for this reason she ages more slowly. The girl begins to try to have a normal life for a while, and what better way than to play Dark Soul economic version. Meanwhile, a man is taken in a wheelchair by the new friend in quotes that he had saved from being robbed. Dooming takes the girl to train. This girl complains that the place stinks. At this moment she summons her fairy Arcilla, cute and kawaii fairy with pink hair and a cheeky attitude. Dooming summons her fairy, who is quickly observed by Syl, who begins to think, where has she seen these characteristics before? In an outburst of the qualities of Sherlock Holmes, deduces, who is a copy of the Queen of the Fairies. The girl now demands a battle between them. The good Dooming refuses, while on the other hand she gets angry, reminding him that she is not a girl. She launches in a blow that he barely dodges, initiating a duel that he finally accepts. Summons her weapons for combat and she smiled smugly. While he praises her, you can see the base of the Ark, a black multi-story building on a desert. A man with blonde hair gives the orders to Ayla, who can see his anger, in which he surrounds. While she leaves he curses while he hits the wall. How was it possible that his beloved daughter distanced himself so much from him? How was it possible that he didn't even tell him dad? Meanwhile the battle is at its peak, she throwing a kick and he dodging. To her surprise he manages to reach her sword. As for the battle, it is at its peak if he asks where he is from and leaves, he boasts of having been born in the Queen's capital. At that moment the battle takes a new point. The girl summons her weapon. To Dooming's surprise it is a scythe. He supposed that being Ayla's sister would have two swords. When the battle was going to follow, a voice distracts the girl in that she fell to the ground and loses her great weapon. With her nose bleeding she emerges from the mists of the rubble with a great pose. Ayla, to everyone's surprise, she always has a serious look and a calm attitude, loses its own way, and throws herself like a sister who bothers her pretty sister. While asking her how she has grown, the pretty fairy of Ayla enters the same mode and does exactly the same, throwing herself annoyingly over Syl's. Things are better they have at their point of surprise before. Syl's boasted that she is more experienced and also has more time than the Dooming fairy, to the horror of the Ayla fairy, who knows the level and power of the Queen of Thorns, who is only dedicated to silently listen to everything. The girl asks her sister who he was. It's the first time someone manages to keep up with him. After that there are some compliments between Dooming and Ayla with strange smiles between them. Maybe we'll find out the beginning of a romance. Already at school our protagonist tries to have a common life again, while Ayla wonders that he will also be there. The truth would be very hard for a civilian to enter his world. Crashing, some students throw Ayla's books. In the apparition a man arrives. Random student number 1 who smiles at him and tries to flirt with our pretty blonde. While that was happening a new sensei arrived at the door. And look what a surprise, the girl they had stolen a few days ago is the same sensei. Now we meet the girl who had stolen her bag, Sensei Oman, a new character who takes center stage and with a past that we don't know. Everyone falls in love with her in seconds. When they are out, the sensei arrives and invites the protagonist to eat, being later an invitation extended to him and then to the friend random that we will not remember his name. After eating, the sensei has the brilliant idea of going to eat on the beach. Ayla withdraws in the middle of the street and makes a call to investigate to the sensei, since it is very rare that so many conveniences occur. But there she is reached by the boy from a while ago named Lukuan, hoping that he is not a filler character who tries to seduce her. For the sake of the script he invites her to have a coffee, but she refuses, and when leaving he enters with an angry face. The most awaited moment of the series arrives, the moment of the beach. The girls in a full body school outfit, the sensei in a beach chair, and the beautiful Ayla walking with her little sister, although she is being very overprotective all the time. And at these times, the sensei, as a good and very confident character, asks the protagonist to put sunscreen on her back. The good Dooming, as an expert in these, explodes the sunscreen falling on the face and body of the sensei. The girl attacks with her head, while between the discussions she reaches Ayla, and at a moment worthy of a crazy series, the protagonist slips with the cream falling on Ayla, who after a moment of tension throws a punch at him. Ending the day in a house in the middle of the forest, the protagonist is informed that there is a fairy of great power who has sent him an invitation. At this moment our protagonist saw the silhouette of a Japanese warrior who was watching the arrival of our protagonist. He warned him to follow him. He followed him for a good stretch. Good follower of theatrical attitudes, the new enemy was waiting for him on the top of a cliff in the moonlight, with a brilliant enemy pose. When he began to attack, our hero Ayla and the girl arrive, blocking the attack and showing that the hero has a brain and has managed to send a warning from where he was going. The girl looks ready for combat and recognizes one of these enemies, a powerful user of fairy Shinfei, a man with the appearance of a civilian samurai who, demonstrating his ability to call Dooming with his aura, begins to fight, overwhelming our protagonist. Meanwhile, he realizes that he does not fight with all of him. He wants a battle spirit, which I fought him to death. To inspire him to fight with everything, he stabs the beautiful Ayla goodbye to the beautiful Ayla. But anyway, with the beautiful Ayla on the verge of death, our main character manages to stop the inevitable fall of Ayla on the ground. The waifu bleeds to death and leaves her sister screaming with tears, and the protagonist trying to find how to save her. Seeing that his plan has failed, Faye looks with contempt as he has not achieved his goal. But Dooming Car Eaten in anger launches the battle using the power of until multiplied by 3. The enemy manages to dodge the attacks, but the anger and power within Dooming manages to prevail over his adversary, who is thrown back and decides to get serious, using a technique that involves vision in a Red Sea and a remote tower broken into pieces. Subscribe, activate the bell, leave a succulent like, and everything you need so you don't miss a video from this channel again. See you in a next summary.